Hey everyone, welcome back for another video. My name is Tanya for those of you that are new here, and I'm a watercolor artist. So in today's video, I'm going to show you how to paint two little mittens holding a snowball, but you can even turn it into a Valentine card if you'd like to, and I'll show you how. Hope you enjoy the video. Okay, so to get started, I've got my watercolor paper, I have a pencil and an eraser, I've got my Arteza watercolor brush pens. I'll let you know what colors I'm using as I'm going along, but I'm just using a couple of colors today, not a lot. And I also have my Winsor Newton watercolors in case I want to bring those in also. And I've got my water and my paper towel. All right, so to get started, we're going to just kind of do, it's almost like a little bit of a heart shape because the two mittens are like this. Your thumbs are going to be on the outside. So you want the mitten to just kind of be round here, so they kind of form a heart shape. So just with your pencil, just lightly sketch in almost like a heart, just like that. And then you're going to bring it all the way down. And then your thumbs are on the sides, so you're going to bring in a thumb. And don't worry about it, they're just mittens. It's not really, you know, you're not getting the shape of the actual thumb. It's just a mitten, so make it as round as you want. Bring that down also. Make sure they all come down to the same point here because they're going to be ending at the same point where the wrist is. So just make a line there for the wrist. Bring your thumb down to that too. And actually this thumb doesn't need to go all the way down. Just the outside of the thumb, not the inside of the thumb. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to make some like furry part here on the mitten. You don't have to do this. You don't have to make it furry. You can make it, you know, just a straight line if you want. And then if that looks funny to you and you want it bleeding off the page and you don't want it just floating in the middle of the page, just bring down the sleeves of the jacket like that. But if you don't mind that your little image is floating in the middle of the page, you don't have to bring down the jacket if you don't want to. All right, so there's two things that we could do. Since it's winter, you could just go ahead and make a nice round snowball. So it looks like the mittens are holding the snowball. But I'm going to just kind of change it up a little bit. And Valentine's Day is next month. So if you wanted to turn these into little Valentine cards, what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn that little snowball into a heart snowball. So it's kind of going to mimic the shape of the mittens here. So it's still going to be a snowball, but it's just going to be like a little heart. Like that. Look how cute that is. But if you didn't want to do that and you just want to do a plain snowball, then just go ahead and make the circle. All right, so go ahead and lighten up your lines now. And I'm not going to lighten up mine too much because I want you to be able to see this on video. Go ahead and get rid of all the lines that you're not going to use. If you were really sketchy about it and you made a couple different lines there, go ahead and erase the lines that you're not going to follow along with. All right, so I've got my Arteza watercolor brush pens. If you don't have this brand and you have the Tombow brand or anything else, it doesn't matter. Just pull whatever you have. If you don't have watercolor brush pens, you can follow along with just regular watercolor as well. I'm probably going to be bringing in a little bit of that towards the end. But I am having a lot of fun with these watercolor brush pens, so I'm just going to continue using that for the beginning of this painting at least. All right, so I wanted to have some perspective. So to make it look like it's darker in the middle, because if you're cupping your hands, that little snowball is going to form like a little shadow behind. So just pretend there's a little snowball in the middle of my hand. That snowball is going to be causing a shadow on my mittens. So go ahead and outline whatever color you want the mitten to be. Go ahead and outline the snowball or the heart. So this is going to be nice and dark down here. So go ahead and get enough pigment on your paper because we're going to be applying water to this, so it's going to be diluted in a couple of minutes anyways. So go ahead and get as much down as you want. And then I also want to kind of outline my mitten as well, because when we add water to this, it's going to just kind of, we're going to be pulling it in. So it'll look like the edge is a little bit crisper and a little bit darker, and it's going to be lighter as you go in. So it'll be dark, light, dark. So you can make that as dark as you want also. Kind of keep a nice crisp line as you're outlining. And then go ahead and outline this thumb as well. And then down here, I'm gonna have this furry part be, I think as of right now, it's gonna be white. I might change my mind later, but just go ahead and just kind of make that really bumpy. Really like a shaky line, because that's gonna be like a furry little part there. All right, so now we're gonna go ahead and see how much pigment we can pull off these lines. And if there's not enough pigment, we can go ahead and bring in our regular watercolor, or we can let it dry and put in another layer of the watercolor brush pen. All right, so the brushes that I'm using are just very generic. There's no brand, no name brand here, just because I don't want to use my really good watercolor brushes on this ink. It is ink based. So I don't know if down the line it's going to ruin my good brushes at some point. So I'm going to just use generic brushes. So go ahead and just get it wet. And I'm pulling in, I'm kind of tracing my line here, and I'm pulling in that pigment, all that watercolor ink. I'm pulling it in. So it's going to be darker around the heart or the snowball, and it's going to be darker on the edges here. Now, right now that looks very, very generic. We are going to add detail to this. We're going to make it pop really, really nicely, but this is the first layer. Go ahead and get all that red nice and saturated. Try not to go outside of your lines. Like, don't go inside your heart. Don't go outside of the mitten. Stay inside the mitten here. And just activate all that pigment. Okay, do the other side. And you can go in little circles. I'm kind of rubbing it in little circles just to get a lot of that ink off my page and into the middle of my mitten here. Look how easy that was. That looks so cute, and it's just the first layer. We're gonna go ahead and I'm gonna drop in, just because I want it to be a little bit darker here, you could do two things. You could let this dry completely and go over it again with another layer of your watercolor brush pen. If you go over it right now, it's gonna be diluting with the water that's right there. It's showing up a little bit, but not as dark as I want it to be. So you can go ahead and work it now if you want to, but it's not as dark as I want it to be because the water it's still wet. My painting is still wet and it's getting activated right away with that water. And I don't want that. So you can let it dry. These are the two things you can do. You can let it dry and go over it again with your watercolor brush pen, or you can just go ahead and start adding in some regular watercolor even while it's wet. I'm just pulling in my Winsor Newton. This is just Winsor Red. So go ahead and get that nice and wet, and you can just start dropping it in. Look at that. Look how beautiful that is. That's the darkness. That's the intensity that I wanted with the watercolor. And I wasn't able to achieve that with the watercolor brush pen, at least not at that point. Maybe eventually down the line, adding a few layers, you could. But it's always nice just to have even just your regular watercolors on hand if you want something a little bit more intense. Look at the bleeding that's doing. Isn't that gorgeous? Bring it in because you don't want a line there. Even though it's really blending in beautifully here, it's not blending in beautifully up on the top of the mitten, probably because it was starting to dry a little bit already. So you can always help that along. I'm gonna bring in a little bit of my regular watercolor, even down here on the thumbs. Blend it in a little bit. I don't want to blend it in too much because I do want the middle of the mitten to stay nice and light. If you feel that this side of the mitten and this side of the mitten are merging too much and you're not getting that light color that you want here, go ahead and dab it off with a paper towel. That's just gorgeous. And if you want, you can always lift up, take a little clean water and lift up some of that pigment there and wipe it off on your paper towel. If you feel like it's too much, just take a clean brush, wipe it off, and all I'm doing is, I don't know if you can see this off camera, I'm just dabbing it off on my paper towel here. So you could either take the paper towel and dab it directly, or take the brush and rub it off and then dab your brush onto your paper towel. Either way, both works. Just see which one works best for you. And I'm going to bring a little bit of that down before my mitten starts to dry here. All right, look how pretty that is. That is gorgeous. All right, I've got a little bit more pigment on this side than I do on this side. So I'm just gonna bring in a little bit more on this side just to make them match. Or you could lift up a little bit of the pigment on this side, whichever way you want it to be. Or if you like that they were not matching, you could leave it like that too. But I'm just gonna add a little bit more there. All right, I'm gonna let that dry. And we are gonna go on to the jacket part. I'm gonna bring in, let's see, what do I have here? This is Sapphire Blue. So it's my Arteza Sapphire Blue. And I'm gonna go ahead and just do the little sleeves here. So I'm just gonna do the same thing that we did with the heart. And I'm gonna outline the little sleeve here. So it's bumpy here because this is gonna be the furry part of my mittens. And then this is my jacket. So go ahead and get enough pigment on those edges. And if you don't want your jacket to be really saturated with paint, then you don't need to go over this line and thicken it up like I just did. You could just do one line and just have it be like a light blue or something like that. But I wanted a lot of pigment on there. So I outlined again, and I'm bringing in with just water, and I'm going to activate all that ink, all that watercolor ink. And I'm going to bring it in just like we did with the heart. And I'm trying to just rub the edge a little bit here so it activates it nicely. And I'm going to slowly bring it in. Now I don't want a big white space right here, so I am going to close up my gap, but I do still want it light. Go ahead and do that to the other side. Just rubbing that line that I had made, activating that ink. And I'm going to bring it in. And again, I want to get rid of that white space, and I want it to be just light blue, so I'm merging it all together. Look how easy that was. Now, if you wanted it to be a little bit more saturated like we did up here, I'm just going to go ahead and pull in my Winsor Blue Green, regular watercolor, Winsor Newton, and I'm just going to go over my edges a little bit more while my sleeve is still wet. I'm just going to pull in a little bit more of that and let it just flow together. I should have just did one and showed you the difference, but I think you get the idea here. And then if it's leaving too much of a white space, again, damp brush, just merge it together. Merge all those sides together. Now, when you're merging together, you don't want to merge all the way from the edge in, because then that's going to bring in way too much blue. You just want to merge the inside of the little your little space here. That's all I did, was I just merged the outside of this blue right here. I didn't pull from the sides because that may pull too much blue into the middle, and then it closes up your white space a little bit, and you probably don't want that. All right, we're gonna go ahead and before we do our little snowball or our little fur here, which are gonna be mostly white because it's snow and I wanted to leave this white as well, the fur down here. So we're gonna bring in a little bit of maybe like a Payne's gray or something just to kind of give it a little shadow, a little depth. But right now, as we're letting this dry, I'm gonna go in and just do a little bit of, maybe a little bit of a, let's see, a light blue, maybe a little light blue for the sky or whatever. As it's holding down like this, maybe you're seeing the snow beneath you, and then you're just gonna give that maybe just a little bit of a blue tint. Or it could be that it's the sky, whatever you want. It doesn't even have to be blue. You could do whatever color you want. I'm just choosing blue. All right, so I'm gonna change my brush. All right, so I've got another generic brush. It's just a little bit bigger. The number has been rubbed off, so I can't even tell you what number this is, but to me it looks like a 3 or a 4. Probably more like maybe even a 4 or 5. I would say 4. All right, so I'm gonna take some blue here, the same blue that I had used before, but I'm gonna dilute it a lot with water because I want just a light blue, just for the background. And you can go ahead and you can do two things. Actually, I'm gonna show you two different techniques. One, you can take a lot of paint on a nice wet brush and you can start making splatter marks like that. And then you could take just a damp, clean brush and you can merge some of those circles together if you want to just kind of, you know, you don't want it as spotty, you just want it a little bit more just to show that there's just a little bit back there, but it's not as spotty or textured. You can then go ahead and just rub out those little dots. Or you can take a little bit of blue on your brush already and just kind of go around your page like this. And it gives you pretty much the same look. Go around that white though on your mitten here because you're gonna want that white to pop. So in order to make that pop, you have to go around it with color. So even though the background is nice and light, go over it. Go over that little edge right here with some blue or whatever color you choose. All right, and I'm being careful not to bump up to my mitten or my sleeve because then it's gonna start bleeding. Oh, look, it just started bleeding right there. That's okay, it doesn't really bother me. I'm gonna take a paper towel and I'm just gonna dab that off. I'm gonna go ahead and dry this, so we're gonna add a little bit of maybe a little Payne's Gray to give it a little depth in the heart and on the little furry part of the mittens here. Okay, so I went ahead and I dried my mitten and the sleeves here, and then I dried most of the background. There's still a little bit that's wet here and there. I still see a little bit of shine from the water, but that's okay because we're not really doing anything else to the background at this point. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna take my smaller brush again, and I believe this is a size 2. I didn't tell you that last time. It's just a generic brush. There's no number on here at all. I don't even know what brand this is. It's that generic, but I believe this is a size 2. So that's normally what I go for. All right, so I'm gonna take a little bit of my Payne's Gray, make sure this is Payne's Gray, yes it is, and I'm gonna go ahead and get it wet. And I had a little bit here on my palette already. I'm just gonna get that wet. Okay, and I'm gonna go around my heart just a little bit. And you're gonna probably activate some of that red. That's okay. It's totally fine. There's no way around that unless you're just really, really careful. And to me, it's all right to get a little bit of that red because it's almost like a reflection that the mittens are reflecting onto the snow. So it's okay. So right now I've just got a little bit of Payne's Gray and some of that red is starting to come in. You don't want too much of the red, but a little bit is all right. If it is too much and it's really bleeding on you, go ahead and just dab it off with your paper towel. All right, and then what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna do a couple little spots here and there. All I did was I took very diluted Payne's Gray and I added some little marks here and there, just to kind of give it some texture. If it's too much, take a paper towel and dab some of that off. And actually I'm gonna dab off some of that red that's bleeding in because now it's just bleeding in a little too much. Always change. See how where I just dabbed off, there's red on here? If I go over and dab it again with that same exact point, that red on the paper towel is gonna go on to the white part of the paper. I don't want that. So always, when you start getting this, the color that you're picking up, switch over and use a clean part of your paper towel. Otherwise, you will put that ink, that pigment, back onto your page, and you don't want that. All right, so I'm gonna do the same thing to the furry part of the mittens here. I'm just gonna put some like little, I don't know, dots, squiggly marks to make it look like it's furry. If you like how dark that is, go ahead and leave it. If you don't, you can pull it off with your paper towel or a clean brush. I'm trying to be careful not to go onto my blue or my red like I did on my Snowball up here. All right, I like the way that looks. It's a little too dark, so I'm taking a clean part of my paper towel and I'm gonna dab it off just a little bit like that. Perfect. Excellent. All right, so what I'm gonna do at this point is I'm gonna see if I could add, let's see, a little bit of this is called denim blue. It's a little bit of a darker blue than we had done down here. I'm gonna go over just the edges. Oh yeah, see how nice and dark that is? I'm gonna go over just the edges of my sleeve because I just wanna deepen up how dark that is on the edges. Just a little bit more. It gives a little bit more depth, a little bit more shadow on the inside where the sleeves are coming together, and underneath, almost like that furry part is making a little bit of a shadow on your sleeve here. So I went ahead and put a little bit of a darker blue, take a clean brush, a wet clean brush, and just start activating that and see if it'll pull out. If it doesn't do the job like you want it to, you might have to just go ahead and use some regular watercolor. And maybe I will, because it's not doing exactly, I mean, it's pulling it out a little bit, but not as much as I wanted. I like my things a little bit more saturated. So I'm gonna take a little Payne's Gray, and I'm just gonna go over what I just did. I'm just dabbing on a little Payne's Gray here and there. Look at that, now that pulled it out. Look at that. You can see the difference between that sleeve and that sleeve. I like this one way better. If you don't and you like this one better, just leave it alone. You don't need to go as dark as me. I tend to push my shadows a lot. That's just a look that I like. And if you don't like that, don't do it. If you feel that you need to bring it in a little bit, go for it. Not too much though. So that was just my regular Winsor Newton Payne's Gray. And I'm going to do the same thing. Let's see. I'm going to bring in a little bit of blue. No, you know what? I'm going to bring in a little bit of green. Red and green are opposite on the color wheel. And when you mix them together, you get a darker color, almost like a brown or a gray. And I'm going to bring in just a little bit of green. You can always go in with a little bit of a darker red, a Payne's Gray, whatever you want. But I'm going to see what it looks like bringing in a little bit of green. See that? They mix together and right away they make this like grayish brown color. It's because they're opposite on the color wheel. And I'm just going to pull that in a little bit, just down. And maybe even go around my snowball just a little bit more. Just to give it a little bit more shadow. If you don't want to do this part, you don't have to. Like I said, I love to push my shadows. But if that's not your style, then don't do it. But that is definitely my style. I like to just push my highlights and my shadows. All right, so you see the difference now between this and this. This has definitely more pop, more dimension to it. Again, if you don't like that, leave it softer. There's no right, there's no wrong. Just whatever you like. All right. Oh, and the green I'm using, I didn't tell you. The green I'm using is Winsor Green Blue. It's almost like a forest green. It's really pretty. Bring that in. And you want to do that before it starts to dry. So as it's wet, I'm going to go around it. And if you feel that it's just too dark for you, too dark, then pick it up with your paper towel or your napkin. I'm sorry, paper towel or your brush. I'm just going to add a little bit more on the edge here. You don't want to go into the heart because then the green on the white of the paper will definitely show up green. And I don't want that to show up green. So just be careful to keep all that on the outside of the heart. If you do go into the heart with green or Payne's Gray or whatever, you can always take a little bit of bleed-proof white later and go over and crispen up your heart if you want to. Or you can just add a little bit more red, which I think I will do because I got a little bit of green showing up there. So I'm just going to take a little bit of red and I'm just going to go in and put a little bit of red over what I just did, just like that. That way none of that green is showing up and it just turns into that grayish brown color that I was trying to go for. If you want it to blend in a little bit more, add a little bit more water. Soften up that edge a little bit. Look how pretty that is. That just gave it so much depth. It really looks like you're holding a snowball because look how dark that is. I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing, not as dark, but a little bit like around my mitten here too. Just pull it in. And if you did a little too much, then just dab it off. I'll bring in a little bit down the thumb here. And blend it in. How cute that is. This is so cute. You can even do, as we did nice and dark down here, you can always go ahead and just add a little bit of green, Payne's gray, whatever color you want, maybe just a darker red. When you start adding different colors, it just gives your painting a little bit more dimension. If I were just to go ahead and just do a darker red or a Payne's gray, my painting would be a little bit flatter. If you start adding the complement of that color to make it darker, that always pops your painting just a little bit more. That's what I find, at least. And don't forget to do that little split down the middle down there too. All right, look how cute that is. I'm gonna go ahead and add a little bit more Payne's gray where the mittens are touching, right in the furry part here, just to show that split. And I'm taking a clean brush, I'm gonna dab it out on both sides here. If that's too much for you, which it is a little too dark for me too, just dab it off, just like that. And you can start over and just use what you've got on your page already. Oops. And just blend it out. Now a little bit of blue hit my mitten here. So I'm just gonna take a paper towel and I'm just gonna go over that before the blue really starts to pull into all of my mitten. All right, I love the background, but I think I want a little bit more of a speckle. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm going to do the same thing with the blue. I'm gonna make a nice wash right here on my page, on my palette. And then I'm gonna tap it off like I did before with another paintbrush or a pencil or whatever. And I'm gonna try and be careful and just go around my mitten. Just like that. Little bit of texture. Now if you did get some splatter marks on your snowball here, before it dries, just go ahead and pick it up with your paper towel. Look how cute that is. So you can frame it, you can give it to someone, you can make a bunch of these. It was very easy to do. The more you practice this little shape here of the mittens and the heart, the faster you will get, so you can make multiple of them and you can just give them away as little Valentines. Thanks so much for watching the video. I hope you liked it and learned a little something. And if you did like it, please give me a thumbs up and you can make a comment in the comment section. And don't forget to subscribe if you want more videos like this one. And you can also follow me on Facebook and Instagram. Have a great day. Bye.